When the family discovered someone had proposed to their ugly, troublesome daughter, they sent her away like garbage in the cruelest way imaginable. Little did they know, they were handing over the exact treasure the rancher had been dreaming of finding. But what happened when this rejected daughter became the only person who could save them? The answer will leave you speechless. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel. This is how we keep bringing stories that touch hearts and make you reflect on life. Comment where you're watching from. We love knowing how far our stories reach. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by the mailman who could barely hide the malicious smile on his face. Everyone in town knew what that envelope meant for the Morrison family. When Robert Morrison, the family patriarch, opened it, he found something even better than news, a golden opportunity. Thomas Bennett, the most prosperous rancher in the neighboring region, was asking for the hand of one of the Morrison daughters in marriage. The man had built a rural empire from nothing. He owned more land than any other proprietor within 100 kilometers. His reputation as an honest worker echoed through all the inland towns. He was exactly the kind of son-in-law any family would want. The problem: Thomas had specifically asked for Emma. Robert called his wife Margaret and their 2 older daughters to the living room. Victoria, the eldest at 26, sat with perfect posture. Charlotte, 24, adjusted her dress with natural elegance. Both were the family's pride, beautiful, educated, obedient, and marriageable. "Read this," Robert said, extending the letter with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Margaret began reading aloud. As the words left her mouth, her smile grew almost disturbingly. The daughters exchanged confused looks until their mother reached the part where Thomas specifically mentioned Emma's name as the desired bride. The silence that followed was broken by Victoria's laughter. Charlotte soon joined, and within seconds, the entire room echoed with laughter that had nothing joyful about it. They were cruel laughs, loaded with a morbid satisfaction. "He asked for Emma," Margaret repeated, as if needing to confirm what she'd just read. "The richest and most respected man in the region asked for our Emma in marriage." "This is perfect," Robert said, clapping his hands once. "Simply perfect." Emma wasn't in the room during this conversation. She was in the back of the house caring for her sick grandmother, as she did every day. It was always her who took on the most difficult responsibilities, the care no one else wanted to do, the tasks that dirtied hands or required patience. The truth about Emma Morrison was too complex to fit into her family's limited perceptions. At 23, she had become a growing problem, not because she was disobedient in the traditional sense, but because she possessed something far more dangerous, an unshakable sense of justice and the courage to act accordingly. 3 years earlier, when she discovered the local judge was accepting bribes to favor land grabbers, Emma gathered evidence and delivered it to the proper authorities. The resulting scandal cost the Morrison family a series of lucrative deals that depended on judicial corruption. Robert never forgave her. For the Morrisons, who had built their fortune navigating the murky waters between legality and convenience, having a daughter with a moral conscience was a constant nightmare. But there was another reason they laughed with such satisfaction. Emma, in her family's eyes, was physically inadequate for a prestigious marriage. While her sisters possessed the delicate, refined beauty society expected from respectable ladies, Emma had a more robust appearance, hands calloused from hard work, and a face marked by expressions of determination her mother considered too masculine. What they could unsee or refuse to see was that Emma's physical strength reflected her strength of character. What the family didn't know was that 5 years earlier, at the weekly fair in neighboring town, Thomas Bennett had witnessed something that changed everything. Near the fabric store, 3 young women were shopping. 2 of them clearly examined materials with the care of those educated to recognize quality. The third, however, seemed different. That's when Thomas heard the shouting. On the other side of the square, a short, fat merchant was yelling at an elderly thin man, accusing him of trying to steal one of his chickens. The old man, clearly frightened, tried to explain he had only touched the animal to check if it was healthy before making a purchase offer. Before Thomas could intervene, someone beat him to it. The third young woman had left her sisters behind and walked determinedly toward the confusion. "Stop this immediately," she said, planting herself between the merchant and the elderly man. Her voice was clear and strong, carried with natural authority. "And who are you to give me orders, girl?" The man snarled. "I'm someone who's been watching this stall for 10 minutes and saw exactly what happened," the young woman responded, crossing her arms. "This gentleman touched the chicken for 3 seconds. asked the price, and when you said it cost double the normal value, he thanked you and walked away. At no point did he try to take anything. The crowd began murmuring. Several people confirmed they had also seen the interaction. Then the young woman did something that left Thomas completely impressed. She took out a small purse, counted some coins, and extended them to the merchant. "How much is the chicken?" she asked calmly. 2,000, he answered, confused. "Here's 2,000, she said, placing the coins in his hand. "Now the chicken is mine." She turned to the elderly man and extended the animal to him. "For you, sir. For your family." The old man was shocked, trying to refuse the gift, but the young woman insisted with such gentleness that he finally accepted with tears streaming down his face. "But I can't accept this, young lady. You don't know me. I don't need to know you to know you're an honest person," she replied, smiling, "and that you have a family waiting for you at home." As the old man walked away, clutching the chicken like it was the world's greatest treasure, Thomas noticed the two sisters had arrived, their expressions revealing a mixture of shame and irritation. "Emma, what have you done now?" the older one asked, with a voice loaded with disapproval. "Just what was right," Emma replied, wiping her hands on her dress. "You spent the family's money on a stranger. Dad will be furious. Then I'll explain it to him," Emma said, with a calmness that impressed Thomas even more. From that day on, Emma Morrison never left his thoughts, and 5 years later, he decided to ask for her hand in marriage, not despite her reputation, but because of it. Back in the Morrison living room, the family conspiracy took military precision. 5 years dealing with the problems this girl causes us, Robert muttered. And now a man appears, asking specifically for her. "Dad, do you think he knows about the incidents?" Victoria asked. "Impossible," Margaret replied with conviction. "Thomas Bennett lives 2 towns away. If he knew her reputation, he'd never make this request. And that's exactly what makes this situation so perfect," Robert said, hitting his fist on the table with satisfaction. "He's expecting to receive a proper, educated, submissive wife. Imagine his surprise when he discovers he chose our Emma." The malice of the plan was simple and devastating. They would respond to Thomas's letter, confirming the marriage, but wouldn't mention anything about Emma's true personality. They'd let the man discover on his own that he'd asked for the most problematic daughter's hand. "When he discovers what kind of woman she really is," Robert continued, "it'll be too late. The marriage will have already happened, and she'll be his problem, not ours." What they didn't know was that outside the room, Emma had stopped hanging clothes and was leaning against the wall, hearing every word of the conversation. Emma closed her eyes and rested her forehead on the cold wood of the wall. For 23 years, she had tried to earn her family's love and respect. She had cared for her sick grandmother, taken on the house's most difficult tasks, tried to be an obedient daughter, but none of it mattered because she had committed the unforgivable crime of having a conscience. The tears she'd been holding back for years finally began streaming down her face. They weren't tears of sadness, but of painful liberation. Finally, she understood she would never be loved by these people, no matter what she did. But as she wiped the tears with the back of her hand, Emma made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted to get rid of her so desperately, she would make it a victory. She wouldn't go to this marriage as a victim. She'd go as a woman who finally understood her own worth, regardless of her family's opinion. Monday arrived with a grey sky. Emma woke before dawn, as she had for the last 5 days, unable to sleep deeply, knowing her life was about to change completely. The carriage that would take Emma to Thomas's farm arrived punctually at 8 a.m. The driver helped her load her small, worn suitcase. "Have a good trip, my daughter," Robert said, kissing her cheek with an affection display Emma knew was purely performative. "We hope you'll be very happy in your new life," Margaret added, though her tone suggested she neither expected nor truly desired to receive correspondence. Emma climbed into the carriage without looking back, knowing that if she did, she might lose the courage to leave. The journey would take approximately 4 hours. Emma used the time to organize her thoughts and mentally prepare for the meeting that would define her future. What intrigued Emma most was the fact that Thomas had asked specifically for her. Her sisters were objectively more beautiful, better educated in the feminine arts, more suitable for a prestigious marriage. Why would a successful man choose precisely the daughter her own family considered problematic? As the carriage approached its destination, the landscape began changing. The properties became larger and better maintained, the fields more organized, the cattle visibly healthier. Finally, the driver announced they had arrived at the Bennett farm. Emma looked out the carriage window and felt her breath catch for a moment. The property was impressive, not ostentatious, but solid and well planned. But what caught Emma's attention most was the man who came out of the house to receive her. Thomas Bennett was taller than she remembered, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of physical work. His dark hair had some grey strands at the temples, and his face showed the marks of someone who spent a lot of time in the sun. But it was his eyes that made her recognize him immediately. The same attentive, intelligent eyes that had observed her at the fair 5 years ago. He had watched her that day. She was certain of it now. "Miss Emma," he said, approaching with measured steps. His voice was deep and calm, loaded with a gentleness that made something move in her chest. "Welcome to Bennett Farm, Mr. Thomas," she replied, making a small curtsy. "Thank you for receiving me." He took her suitcase and gestured toward the house. "You must be tired from the journey. How about we go inside to talk more comfortably?" The living room was simple but welcoming. Thomas served coffee in delicate porcelain cups. "How was the trip?" he asked, sitting in the armchair beside her. "Smooth, thank you," she replied, holding the cup between her hands. "Your property is beautiful. It must have taken years to build all this." 10 years of constant work, Thomas said with discreet pride. "I bought the land when it was nothing but abandoned pasture." Emma felt impressed. She knew the value of hard work and could recognize results when she saw them. "It must be gratifying to see all this grow by your own hands." "It is," he agreed, "but a property this size calls for a family. An empty house, no matter how big, remains just an empty house." There was a moment of silence as both drank their coffee. Emma knew the time had come for serious conversations. "Mr. Thomas," she began, placing the cup back on the saucer, "I need to ask you a direct question." "Please," he said, leaning slightly forward. "Why did you specifically ask for me? My sisters are more beautiful, better educated in the arts, expected of a wife. Any sensible man would choose one of them." Thomas remained silent for a long moment, studying her face. Emma saw something changing in his expression, a decision being made. "May I be equally direct?" he asked. "Please, because I saw you at a fair 5 years ago. I saw what you did for an elderly man being falsely accused of theft. I saw you spend your own money to buy a chicken and give it to him, expecting nothing in return." Emma felt blood rise to her face. "You were there, I was, and I spent 5 years thinking about the woman who had the courage to do what was right, even knowing her family would disapprove." Thomas leaned even more forward. "Miss Emma, I don't want a beautiful, silent wife. I want a companion who has the moral strength to do what's right, even when it's difficult." His words hit Emma like lightning. Her entire life, her family had criticized her for exactly the qualities Thomas was praising. "But you should know," she said, finding courage to continue being honest, "that my family considers me problematic. They sent me here because they want to get rid of me, not because they think I'd be a good wife for you." "I suspected that," Thomas replied calmly. "The speed with which they accepted my request was revealing. And even knowing that, you still want to marry me." Thomas stood and walked to the window, looking at the fields extending beyond the house. "Emma, may I tell you something about myself? Of course, I could have married any of a dozen women over the last 10 years, all beautiful, all from respectable families, all who would have been sensible choices." He turned to face her. "But every time I considered marriage, I thought about that girl from the fair who defended a stranger, and no other woman could compare to that memory." Emma felt tears sting her eyes. "You don't really know me. I might disappoint you, or you might be exactly what my life has been needing," he said, sitting back down. "Emma, may I make a proposal?" "What kind of proposal?" "That we spend a few weeks truly getting to know each other, without pressure, without impossible expectations. If at the end of that time we discover we're compatible, we'll marry. If not, I'll help you find a suitable situation, either returning to your family or finding another arrangement that makes you happy." The generosity of the offer left Emma speechless. "You would do that? Even if I decided not to marry you?" "I would, because a woman with your character deserves to have choices in life, not just be pushed from one unhappy situation to another." For the first time in years, Emma felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. "If I accept this proposal," she said slowly, "you promise I can be completely honest about who I am, even if some things about me bother you?" "Especially then," Thomas replied. Lies and pretense are a terrible foundation for any relationship, much less a marriage. Emma took a deep breath. Then, I accept your proposal. But with one condition. What? That you also be completely honest with me about your expectations, your fears, your dreams. If we're going to truly know each other, this has to work both ways. Thomas smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since arriving. Deal. They shook hands to seal the agreement, and Emma felt an electric current run through her arm at his touch. The following weeks passed like a dream for Emma. Each morning brought new discoveries about life on the farm, about Thomas, and surprisingly, about herself. For the first time in her life, she was in an environment where her opinions weren't just tolerated, but actively requested. What if we built a system of connected cisterns? She suggested one afternoon while watching workers carry water for the cattle. That way, even during drought, we'd have sufficient reserves. Thomas stopped walking and looked at her with admiration. That's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that before? Because you think like a man who's always had resources. Emma replied honestly. I think like someone who grew up seeing people suffer from lack of planning. It was this type of exchange that made Thomas's heart beat faster. Emma not only possessed an admirable sense of justice, but also practical intelligence that perfectly complemented his own abilities. But it wasn't just the practical aspects of life that brought them closer. During long conversations at the end of the day, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, they discovered an emotional compatibility that surprised them both. Tell me about your family, Thomas asked one of those afternoons. Emma hesitated for a moment, but then decided to keep her promise of complete honesty. They see me as a mistake, as someone born with defects they can't correct. What kind of defects? I care too much about strangers. I ask inconvenient questions. I can't pretend I don't see injustices. Emma looked at her hands. My mother always said a lady should be like a pretty doll, seen but not heard. Thomas remained silent for a long moment. And what do you think of that? I think a life without purpose isn't worth living. If you have the ability to help someone or improve a situation, how can you simply ignore it? Exactly, Thomas said with conviction. Emma, do you know what the difference is between you and your sisters? She looked at him, waiting. They are beautiful. They are decorative. You are transformative. He turned to face her completely. Your sisters can beautify a room, but you can change a life, transform a community. That's infinitely more valuable. His words touched something deep in Emma's soul. For the first time, someone not only accepted her most problematic characteristics, but saw them as virtues. Tell me in the comments, would you do what Emma did? Would you leave your family to marry someone you barely know but who truly values you? As days passed, the attraction between them grew naturally and intensely. It wasn't just mutual respect or intellectual compatibility. There was a physical chemistry manifesting in prolonged looks, casual touches that seemed to last longer than necessary, in how Emma's heart accelerated when Thomas smiled at her. One night, while walking through the garden under starlight, Thomas suddenly stopped. Emma, I need to tell you something. The irony of the situation didn't escape Emma's notice. The same illegal activities she had tried to expose years ago were finally being investigated by federal authorities. If her family had listened to her warnings then, they could have avoided the scandal. And what does this have to do with us? Thomas asked. Robert looked directly at Emma. We were thinking if you could intercede for us. Perhaps use your influence with your husband to help us financially. During this difficult period, the silence that followed was deafening. Emma looked at the man who had spent 23 years making her feel inadequate, who had sent her away as if it were punishment for Thomas, who had celebrated when he thought he was getting rid of her forever. Father, she said finally, her voice calm but firm. My entire life, you told me I was a problem, that my opinions were inconvenient, that my conscience was a defect. You sent me here believing it was revenge against my husband. Robert lowered his eyes, clearly uncomfortable. But now that you need help, suddenly I'm someone whose influence is worth something. Emma, you're our daughter. No, she interrupted. Our daughter is loved, protected, valued. That was a burden you finally managed to discard. The difference is you thought you were punishing me, but actually, you gave me the greatest gift of my life. Thomas gently squeezed Emma's hand, a gesture of silent support. I won't help you financially, she continued, not because I don't have compassion, but because helping you would facilitate the continuation of the same corrupt practices I always criticized. You made your choices. Now live with the consequences. Robert turned red with anger. After everything we did for you, what did you do for me? Emma asked, her voice rising slightly. Made me feel inadequate for having a conscience, punished me for defending what's right, or sent me away thinking you were harming an innocent man. We raised you, fed you, educated you. You did the minimum the law requires of parents, but you never loved me for who I am. Thomas met me just a few months ago and values me more than you in an entire lifetime. Robert looked at Thomas with anger. And you're going to allow your wife to speak to her own father like this? Thomas smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Morrison, my wife is free to express her opinions. In fact, it was exactly for that reason I married her, for the courage you always tried to destroy. Realizing he wouldn't get what he wanted, Robert returned to the carriage angrily. Before leaving, he shouted one last offense. You'll regret this. Emma and Thomas stood hand in hand, watching the carriage drive away. When it disappeared from view, Emma turned to her husband. Did I do the right thing? You did the only thing you could do being who you are, he replied, kissing her forehead. And I love you even more for it. That night, as they dined in the dining room that was now truly theirs, Emma reflected on the extraordinary journey she had traveled. The family that tried to get rid of her like garbage now begged for her help. The man who supposedly would be the victim of a cruel joke had become her greatest love and support. You know what's funniest about all this? She said to Thomas. What? My parents really thought they were playing a trick on you, that they were sending the defective daughter to ruin your life. Thomas laughed, a rich, warm sound that filled the room. They'll never understand. They gave me exactly the treasure I'd been searching for my entire life. Emma smiled, feeling her heart fill with gratitude. Sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the worst curses, and sometimes, Thomas said, holding her hand across the table, the people who try to hurt us end up directing us to our true destiny. They finished dinner in peace, knowing they had built something beautiful and solid together. A partnership based on mutual respect, true love, and shared values. Emma would never again be the rejected daughter. She was now the beloved wife, the respected counselor, the woman who had found her place in the world, beside someone who saw her exactly as she was, perfect in her imperfection, valuable in her authenticity, loved in her completeness. And so ends another story that makes us reflect on the value of being authentic. If you enjoyed it and want to continue receiving stories like this, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Tell me here in the comments, did this story remind you of any situation in your life? Share with us, because stories like this need to be told and heard. Thank you so much for being here and being part of this special community that grows every day. You are very important to this channel. Until our next meet, Ethan read it slowly. Then he picked up a pen and wrote underneath in his careful handwriting, I will keep painting the rainbows, so people remember that different is beautiful. Grace hugged him, and for once, he did not pull away. He stood there, in his grandmother's arms, surrounded by a lifetime of colors, and knew that he was exactly where he belonged. Years would pass, Ethan would grow, his art would evolve. He would face new challenges, new people who did not understand, new battles against a world that preferred uniformity over uniqueness. But he would also find his community, other artists who saw the world through fractured, beautiful lenses, other individuals on the spectrum who had been waiting for someone to prove that their way of being was worthy. And whenever doubt crept in, whenever the voices told him he was too much or not enough, he would return to his easel. He would pick up his brush, and he would paint another rainbow. Because the boy who painted rainbows knew something the world was still learning, that beauty lives in the spaces between expectations, that genius wears many faces, that the most profound truths are often spoken in colors, not words, and that every mind, no matter how different, has something irreplaceable to offer if we are brave enough to look. So what would you do? If you knew someone whose gifts the world could not see, would you fight for them? Would you believe in them even when no one else did? Would you help them show the world their rainbows? Tell me in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that different is not broken. Different is just different. And sometimes, different is exactly what the world needs most. Subscribe for more stories about the invisible made visible, the voiceless made heard, and the misunderstood made celebrated. Because every person has a story worth telling, and every story deserves to be seen.